Hey guys, welcome back to the Knife Life. Last time we began our exploration of the Indonesian Kris knife. Today we're going to finish it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Sitting in the Sultan's palace in Sukarta, Java, is a meteorite. No one may touch it. Flowers and fruit have been placed all around the meteorite as offerings. This meteorite is a sacred object, but it is not the entire meteorite. When it fell from the sky, the meteorite split into two pieces. The larger piece sitting in repose in the Sultan's garden, the smaller taken to the palace fortress. The smaller piece is now long gone. The palace Kris smiths, or empus, refined the ore within the meteorite and incorporated it into the blades of their Kris daggers centuries ago. The locations of many of these blades have been long since lost. This particular blade is suspected to be of royal heritage and may in fact be one of those blades. Forging meteoric iron into blades isn't unique to Java. Such a thing is popular throughout pretty much every knife culture that I am aware of. What is unique to the Kris is the spirituality and the philosophy behind why the meteorite is forged into the blade. In order to fully understand this, let's ask the question, what is a Kris? One more time. We covered what the Western world considers a Kris in the first video. The Eastern perspective is very different. According to the Indonesians, a Kris is an object of unconditional love. This love exists between the bearer of the blade and the Kris itself. Through this, a Kris protects the bearer from all threats, external and internal, including from oneself. The blade is born from an act of love, exists in a state of love with its bearer, and then is passed from bearer to bearer, generation to generation, in a continuation of that love. The creation of a Kris requires three components. A Kris must be made out of the elements of the earth, the elements of the creator, and the element of humanity. The creator is somewhat analogous to Father Sky, and it's where the use of the meteorite comes from. The forging of a Kris requires the influence of the sky. The iron, steel, and nickel comprising the blade make up the required elements from the earth. A piece of meteorite is a popular and easier means of incorporating the element of sky into the blade. However, the forging of a Kris does not require the use of a meteor. There are other ways to include the element from the sky into the blade. Some methods of that may be to leave the blade outside for a long period of time and allow the rain and wind to weather the blade. Another possibility would be to leave the blade at the top of the highest hill in a thunderstorm and to let the lightning strike it, such as it would a lightning rod. How the element of the sky is incorporated into the blade doesn't matter so long as it is actually done. The human element is the empu himself. Through the love of his craft, the empu forges and births the Kris into existence. The care taken in layering and folding the pomor, the tempering of the blade, the file work along the back of the blade are all contributions of humanity to the process. Because of his part in the process, the empu holds an exalted position in Indonesian society, similar to that of a shaman. Without the empu, there would be no Kris. At the end of the process, a Kris born of earth, sky, and humanity has been brought into existence. In this way, the Kris is believed to be born of the same three components that give life to its future bearer. However, even after all the work is completed, the Kris is not considered to be finished, nor is it ever really considered to be so. The blade is considered to be alive in its own way, and it will change just as a person does as they go from life to life. A kris will mean different things to different bearers, and as such, its identity will change over time. While a blade may be forged in the proper method of a kris, it may still not be a kris. Remembering that a kris is the embodiment of unconditional love, a blade can only be a kris if the blade is carried enough, cared for enough, and loved enough that the blade essentially becomes a part of the bearer's identity. A blade that was bought and simply sits on the shelf is not truly a kris, but rather a souvenir. Now, if you take a look back at everything that we just covered, you may notice that I haven't mentioned anything about the form or function of a kris. That is because there is no such thing as a kris-style knife. This blade, and this blade are all kris knives. If you look at the Western classification of kris knives, you will notice that every style has the word kris followed by the name of that particular kris. For example, the Kris Buddha and the Kris Panyang. The name following the kris is what that style of knife is. This is what I suspect is the source of a great deal of confusion in Western scholarship involving the kris. A Dutchman named Ostmeyer read multiple Javanese manuscripts recording the names of ancient monarchs, their empu, and kris blades they manufactured. Ostmeyer's readings claim that the first kris blades were created somewhere between 230 to 280 AD. A different Javanese story attributes the first kris to a prince from somewhere around 920 AD. The earliest archaeological evidence showing the creation of kris blades as defined by Westerners hails from circa 1361 AD with the Kandi Saku forge scene, the oldest depiction of the creation of the stereotypical Western kris blade. Some of the kris blades I was shown in Guru Jacob's collection are over 800 years old, but they don't fit the Western definition of a kris. I expect that a lot of the confusion regarding the age of the kris stems from the misunderstanding that the term kris represents the philosophical origins and purpose of a blade rather than its shape. This situation becomes even more murky when the Indonesian method of determining the age of a blade is factored in. Indonesians don't determine the age of a blade from the date of manufacture. They include the time required to pass the skill of forging of the blade from generation to generation. For example, a blade forged yesterday by a 10th generation empu would be considered to be centuries old by the Indonesians. The readings of Ostmeyer encountered thus may have been speaking about blades that were in fact physically much younger than believed due to the emphasis on honoring the lineage of an empu. Regardless, there is a great deal of misunderstanding regarding what a kris is. There are also a great deal of myths regarding the kris and magic. There are stories of a kris rattling in its sheath to warn its bearer of impending danger, kris that can kill by simply being pointed at an enemy, or a kris that will zip around the battlefield of its own accord, striking down enemies and laying waste to entire armies. These myths claim that the blades pull their power from the strength of a possessing jinn or demon. Regardless of their popularity, these obviously aren't true, and furthermore, they aren't even really part of the tradition of the kris. This was a result of the Muslim invasions of the Majapahit Empire and the following attempt to incorporate Islamic culture into the local way of life through the kris. This is also seen in the artwork of the time. Many of the kris predating the fall of the Majapahit Empire had grips carved into various Hindu gods. After the fall of the Majapahit Empire, Islamic law prohibits the depiction of living images in art. The grips of Hindi practitioners found afterward often still suggested the shape of the old Hindu gods while remaining amorphous enough in order to skirt around the probations. This leads to an important distinction that should be made. The kris is not a religious item, but rather a spiritual and philosophical one. The idea of the kris may have originated in Hindu culture, but the kris is not a holy blade for Hindus. A bearer may be Hindi, Muslim, Christian, Jew, or any other religious denomination. As mentioned before, a kris is thought to have a life of its own, transforming in its meaning and purpose by passing from one bearer to the next. A kris that belonged to a Hindi may be passed to a Christian bearer, who may see a cross shape in the blade and see it as representative of their faith, after which the blade may pass on to an atheist who loves the blade for their own unique reasons. The faith of the bearer does not matter. It is possible for anyone to bear a kris so long as they truly love the blade. Perhaps one of the greatest representatives of the nature of the kris is the means by which it is cared for. Every Japanese New Year, the bearer of a kris will go through the process of cleaning their kris. The blade is cleansed of all contaminants and a fresh oil is added. The oil that is used has two components: mineral oil, just like that which protects and preserves blades in the West, and second, a pleasant aromatic compound meant to nurture and protect the soul. Jasmine and sandalwood are some of the most common scents mixed into the oil, and a well cared for kris should smell very obviously of these pleasant aromas. Sometimes a blade will be smoked over lit incense as well, which can add to the smell. Even when simply caring for the kris, the dual nature of the physical body of the knife and its spiritual being are both accounted for. Obviously, the kris is much more than most Westerners recognize it for. When I started researching for this video, I was aware of some of the spiritual background of the blade, but not the full depths to which it goes. I was fortunate enough that Gurus Jacob and Daniel were willing to meet with me and educate me on the true nature of a kris. And again, I would like to thank them wholeheartedly for sharing their wisdom with me. If you are interested in learning more about the kris, the world it comes from, or the martial system behind it, take a look at the link to their website down below. Special thanks to Steve Rollert of Keen Edge Knives for loaning me his personal kris for this video. If you are in need of training blades for your own martial arts endeavors, or just wanting something cool, check out his website, also in the description. Let me know what knife you want to see next in the comments below. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. And as always, stay safe and keep living the knife life.